Hi, and welcome to the locker room. I am one of the hosts, Justin Ham, and thank you for joining us as we journey through tough issues that guys face as athletes and just as people in general. Let's welcome our guest today, Austin Johns, as he is here today to help us navigate the questions of guys, God, and does it matter? So, Austin, thank you so much for taking some time to sit with me. I was just wondering if we could maybe start with tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about, what you do, where you are, what season of life you're in.
All right, well, obviously, my name is Austin Johns. I'm currently a freshman at Regent University. I am here loving life, playing soccer, hanging out at the beach. That's kind of where I'm at in my stage of life. I just graduated from Middleburg Central School, played 5 years of soccer there at the varsity level under my dad.
Mm,
Uh, Went out on a high by winning the league title, and
that's right.
now I'm here in Virginia Beach.
I love that. So how was your transition? I'm sure, being in Virginia Beach, I mean, it's got to be great, but it can't beat, 45 and rainy like it's been here. So you really got to miss that weather up here in New York, huh?
I don't miss the weather in New York one bit.
What was the temperature there, just to be curious?
Today it was about 74.
74. And if I don't know when you're listening to this podcast, but it's October 15th and it was 74. So he's definitely made the right choice weather-wise.
Well, whenever this podcast goes out, it'll probably be snowing in New York.
It'll
So,
it could be. It could be. But so yeah, tell us a little bit more about you. So your sport is soccer. What is it about soccer that you find to be, your passion? Why soccer?
well, I think obviously growing up, my parents were both the head coach at the high school level, like my whole
Hmm.
childhood. So I was around it, and I just saw there was like a unique togetherness and a unique excitement and buzz that the whole game like brought to our family when it was during the fall.
Mm,
And I just immediately fell in love with just like the excitement that it brought to my parents, to the players, to the town, um, and just I feel like there's a unique togetherness within the sport that no other sport offers when you look at it from either a community perspective, a nation perspective, or clubs like worldwide. There's just a togetherness that like everybody can relate around one common thing within the sport of soccer more than any other sport in the world, I think.
mm,
So I just think that there's just something really unique from that kind of perspective about the game. And then from playing it my whole life, there's just something extremely rewarding about everything. Not
mm.
just, winning big games or trying to compete for championships, but I think I just feel rewarded after completing each training session, each team practice, each game. There's just a rewarding feeling about going through something difficult and coming out and being like, you completed something. So I think it just offers um, a unique variety of things and everything.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like, being part of something bigger than yourself, being part of a community that maybe even spreads into other countries, as well as just the rewards of the effort put in. That's something that
Yeah,
means a lot to you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. So, what made you choose Regent?
Um, so I truly I loved my coach. I was talking to him for probably the last 3 years and just how he communicated with me. I could just tell he was really just genuine. I could just tell like his main focus was to develop relationships like with his players, and he always like with every conversation he was always putting God first in everything he did. And obviously now being down here with him, it's clear to see that's what he's about. Like soccer is not his number one priority. His number one priority is building men, but also making sure that we are under a coach who's serving the Lord on all that he does. And it was noticeable just over email, and that was the biggest thing because that was the only way I communicated with him. But uh, so definitely he helped. The location certainly helps. The housing setup definitely helps. I have a really nice apartment set up. Andrew being down here, my brother, just to help me get settled in my first year, and like the soccer program itself is fairly new, so I had a unique opportunity to kind of be a part of the building blocks of what's to come for this program. And I'm entering this program now where it's kind of on the rise. So I have a cool spot to be one of the guys on
Yeah.
one of the teams that I think people will be talking about potentially for a long time. That could be a program defining team going forward. So there's a lot of factors, but those are probably the biggest ones.
Love that. So those are some great reasons why you would choose there. You got your family, you got your brother down there. You know, the culture, it sounds like, is on the rise. The program is on the rise. The coach really seemed to be someone that his relationship with the Lord was important to you. And that's part of all what led to you deciding that this is eventually where you want to live. Plus the accommodations in the rooms and all of that. Is that
Absolutely.
fair to say?
Yes.
So what would you say as an athlete, right? As a high level athlete. I mean, we're going to get into this eventually, but last year you set the New York State Section 2 record for most goals scored in a career. So you're not just some schlub.
Not just
You're
some
a
bloke.
you're not just some bloke. You're a high level elite level athlete. So what is it that you're looking for in a coach, especially if you know it's a Christian college and he says he's a Christian coach? What are you looking for in a coach?
I just look for honesty
Mm,
because there's a lot of ways. I mean, a coach has so many personalities, so many egos, so many skill sets to manage. So I just look for honesty. Like, I want a coach who I can come to when I have questions, when I have, even like the hard questions of, you know, why him over me or why is he starting? And I just want a coach that's honest. I want a coach that's not gonna, try and like slide stuff by to make me feel good. And
mm,
I've had a few encounters with him. Just I've been really honest and had a lot of honest conversations with him, like asking him hard questions, and he gave me hard answers, and that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want him to kind of, you know, cakewalk any of the questions, and he was extremely honest, and he always has been. He's been honest with his feedback and with his answers, and I think that's huge, especially at the college level, because when you get honesty, then you truly know like that he loves you, but also, he wants what's best for you. And with like the honesty within the conversations, like I know that he's real, like he's real to
mm,
us, and
yeah.
through like the honesty, I'm able to help myself by with the feedback he delivers.
So it's that authentic, genuine kind of faith
Yeah.
slash approach.
Yep.
How do you see that translating to your team? So like the leader of your team is this genuine, real, authentic person living out his faith. How does that trickle down to you and your teammates?
I think it humbles everybody because he's just not afraid to give it to you straight. Like if he sees something that he doesn't appreciate on or off the pitch, if he sees something that is simply not going to help the team, then he's going to give it to you straight. And he's not afraid to tell you to leave practice. He's not afraid to tell you that you're not traveling. He's not afraid to, just sit you down. Like he just wants what's best for the team in terms of either from a cooperating standpoint or from winning the next game standpoint.
Mm.
So I think it humbles everybody. Nobody has a seriously big like nobody has an ego issue on our team, and I think that stems from just coach being an extremely honest person.
Sounds like he's honest as well as consistent.
Yes, very consistent.
Yeah. Talk a little bit. I mean, I know you personally, obviously. Actually, for those of you listening, I'm related to this lad, but I've known you my whole life, and one of the things I know about you is you're one of the most consistent people that I know. Whether it's training, whether it's the choices you make, the way you live your life. What is it about consistency that's important to you in general?
I think consistency, being consistent with whatever gives you the right to kind of speak on it.
Mm,
It kind of helps you not be hypocritical with something because when you're consistent with anything, if it's sports, if it's a weight loss journey, if it's studying for something, when you're consistent, you can appreciate the results because you know that you are putting in the time for that specific effort time and time again. And I think the only way to see results with anything is through consistency. You can't expect results with anything if you're, you know, doing it 20% of the time. You have to
mm.
be focusing and attempting and working at it, 100% of the time on a regular basis to really expect anything to come out of it. You can't expect unrealistic things when you're just simply not being consistent with whatever it is.
Yeah. How do you think that translates? And really like the target for this podcast is guys, is different ages, athletes. How does that translate into our faith?
I think you can't, expect answers to your prayers, answers to your questions when your Bible's been closed on your desk for
Mm,
weeks and months at a time. So I think just being consistent in prayer, just like with any relationship, if you're not really talking to someone on a regular basis, you kind of have a strayed, segmented relationship. And it's the same thing with God. If you're not constantly in prayer, constantly reading, constantly trying to grow your relationship, then you can't, expect your prayers and your wants to be answered and delivered when you're not, giving God all that you can give him. So
mm.
I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, and I don't know, as your horizon to world is different now that you're in college and you have more access to other people. How do you see people your age when it comes to consistency, whether it's training, whether in training, I should say, how does it go in training? And then we'll talk about the faith piece in a second. But what's your impression of young people today when it comes to training and the work they're willing to do?
I think they're respectfully extremely delusional. I just think they don't expose themselves, and that lack of exposure leaves them with a lack of knowledge, and they can, work hard.
So apologies, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there, but we have it all sorted now. The question I asked Austin before we had to make that little adjustment was, how does the idea of consistency, what are the challenges as it's related to training?
I think it's exposure. Um, I think for me personally, the biggest help to me achieving what I wanted to achieve within the game of soccer was exposing myself to what's out there. Uh, and that was through like ID camps, going to college ID camps, going to different colleges, going to those camps and being around other college level players with college level coaches giving me college level feedback. That really exposed myself to what's out there and where I needed to grow and what I needed to do to be able to compete with and around those guys. And then also exposing myself to what's out there just on a really high level club soccer team by challenging myself and playing with guys that were better than me against opponents that were better than me and just exposing myself that way. I was training with guys that were better than me week in, week out. And then the extra exposure of going to the college ID camps gave me like a real honest assessment of where I was at. And that really helped me make my college decision as well, because that allowed me to see where I was at as a player and where I could really compete. And it was just a big reality check in a good way to just continue to expose myself. And I think kids these days lack that. They don't expose themselves, so therefore they think that what they produce at the high school level will translate to what they think where they're going to college, but they have no idea just the
Mm.
jump level with everything.
What do you think the reason is that they're not exposed? Do you think it's are they afraid? Is it ignorance? And obviously I know you don't know everybody's heart, so it's just kind of like a question.
I don't think it's um ignorance. I think a lot of it is effort. Like I don't they might just not want to go the extra mile to really see what's out there. They might not want to be faced with the harsh reality. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it's ignorance. It might not even be their own fault. They just never tried it, so their
Mm,
conclusions are coming based off of what they experience at the high school level. But I think if they're serious about improving at something like this, with anything, they have to expose themselves to see what's truly out there because they'll just continue to have a false perspective on everything, and I don't think that's good.
yeah, so it's, I mean, just in listening to you, so it sounds like, this idea of, playing at the next level, it's like one of those things that's like an absolute truth. Like you're good enough or you're not.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, am I aware of where I'm at in the whole big picture of things? So keeping that in mind, how does that work? Do you think the idea of exposure or consistency, how does that work when it comes to our walk with Jesus?
Well, yeah, the consistency aspect of obviously just consistently making Jesus a priority in your day every day. Uh,
Mhm.
some days are really hard and some days are really good. So it's just being consistent and everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then the exposure, I think it could look like finding, like for me, being at college would be exposing myself to finding a church, which I did think,
Yeah.
obviously through the help of my brother because he knows the area. But just, I mean, that's hard for some people. You get it's a whole new community, a bunch of new
Sure.
people, so that's hard. I mean, it was hard for me, and it's hard for a lot of people. So exposing yourself in that aspect, but also exposing yourselves to your weakness and your faith. I mean, everybody has a weakness, whether it's there's things you struggle with, sin and all that. So just being real with yourself, being real with God, like trying to, you know, fake pray your way through things is going to get you absolutely nowhere. So to be, authentic in your prayer and
Mm.
just, I mean, something as simple as, asking for forgiveness for something you think is not a big deal, but, you're exposing yourself to the fact that you messed up. And that's something that obviously God wants you to do is to ask for forgiveness of the wrongs that you've done. So I think exposure from a Christian perspective is, being involved in the community,
Yeah.
going going to church, surrounding yourself with other believers that just like in sports, not necessarily they're better Christians, but they know more. So expose
Yeah.
yourself to people who are more knowledgeable and more skilled in terms of maybe just their knowledge of the Bible and their experience. So I think it can all go hand in hand.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're listening right now and maybe you're, in a small group or you're talking with some of your friends, like those are three practical things you can do to increase, your consistency, increase your exposure is get plugged into a church, to be real and be authentic with what you struggle with as well as what you might be good at, and then
Yeah,
surround yourself with people who are further along in their faith.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's important because, it's interesting. So I went to a Christian college and I was fortunate enough to have two very godly Christian coaches that I played for. But I hear stories sometimes of, these Christian colleges, and we don't want to mention names, of course, but it's just the idea that, it's not really people that are there. They're there more for the sport than the faith. And my question is, if you as Austin had the opportunity to encourage somebody who even was at maybe Christian college, maybe a secular college, but they were committed to their faith. What would you say to them to encourage them as they're trying to live out their faith in that kind of environment where they might be one of the few, if the only believer?
I think if they are serious about their faith, then the single most important decision in their college journey is to go to a Christian campus, a Christian school, because I think they would be miserable going to just
Mm.
a normal college. And obviously, it's been done. Like believers go to schools that don't have, a faith based foundation and they do succeed, but I don't think that's necessarily healthy, and I think you'll never be happy and you'll never be satisfied. And I think the biggest one of the biggest reasons I'm like just so happy here is because I know I just feel such a real peace about where
Yeah.
I'm at in terms of I just have I have a godly coach to go to every day at practice and every game. I have like even the classes that I take, like there's a faith-based class that they have you take. So it's just like these little things that add up each day that I
Yeah.
think are extremely helpful, and they help you develop good habits as well. They hold you accountable when you're surrounded by, you know,
Yeah.
friends, teammates, coaches who value Jesus. I think there's an accountability thing with it as well. So I think
Mm.
it's extremely important to
Yeah.
surround yourself with that.
And just for context, for those of you listening, so Austin is speaking on this from experience. He went to a public high school his entire upbringing. So what's the difference you find between now that you're able to kind of walk in that freedom of being able to live out your faith openly and with people alongside you versus in high school? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with that, but you were one of the few, if the only believer on your teams in high school.
Yeah, I think it's the values that the school has. Like everywhere you go, there's there's quotes, there's just Christianity like everywhere on campus. So you're constantly seeing it, you're constantly hearing it, you're constantly surrounding yourself with it. So that like definitely helps to know, that just helps you feel you're like you're not alone. Like at the public school, like I just felt incredibly alone because I mean, I was probably the only believer. Maybe I wasn't, but I was just the only one. And luckily for me, like throughout sports, with my dad as the coach, obviously, he's just an incredible Christian leader and extremely outspoken about his faith to his boys. So being surrounded in an athletic program that prioritized Jesus because our coach did, and he made it very
Yeah.
known to all of his players, that helped me a lot because school, it was tough, it was lonely, and it was sad with how just it was just broken. Like the classrooms were broken, the kids were broken, how the teachers like taught was broken. But then participating in soccer, especially under my dad, it was extremely helpful in terms of my faith to know that I really wasn't alone because I had him, but also to see how faith and valuing Jesus brought like the whole team together. Like
Yeah.
every one of my teammates, every one of his players knows where he stands in his faith, and they all throughout their playing careers they heard of Jesus because of my dad. So everybody kind of knew of Jesus. It was just a matter of they didn't truly know him as their savior, but it was extremely valuable to know that it was a priority within the boys soccer program, and that was extremely helpful.
Yeah. And then just, again, it's just like the importance of the impact of a coach. They'll talk about, I mean, he's your father, so obviously that's one level, but I mean, I know him as well. And it's just, he's the same whether it was you or any one of his players. So, what's the value of a coach that's willing to take a stand for something like that, even in a dark place like a public school?
I think when you have a leader like a coach who was extremely bold and courageous, in his faith, in his so from like a faith perspective, just bold in his faith and in his beliefs, and just extremely passionate about giving all of his players a example of what a godly man and a godly leader is. And then from a from a sports perspective, just an extremely great example of just someone who's passionate, someone who's relentless, someone who wants to win and wants to be better every day. So it was the best of both worlds as an athlete because you had
Mm.
the ability to be surrounded by a guy who was just the prime example of what it means to just be passionate, to relentlessly work, to want to win, and then to be surrounded by a guy who loved Jesus, loved his players, and wanted his players to become better men, but also wanted his players to be introduced to who Jesus Christ was way more than winning games. And he did that all a lot. He did some things a lot, and that was, just being a godly example and winning a lot of games. That's what he did.
Mhm. That's right. So, that's the impact a coach can have. And, those of you out there listening to this, if you want to be a coach someday and you love Jesus, like those are things that can be done, right? Like it's probably wasn't easy for your dad to jump into that role, but he knew that's what he was called to do.
Something as simple as like before each game, he would read a verse. It was something as simple
Mhm.
as we would have team dinners and we would pray before we eat. Like it's the little things. It wasn't anything extraordinary. He wasn't preaching any sermons. It was simply a Bible verse here and there. It was constantly, a short prayer with his boys, praying for his boys. It was having them over for small groups where we would, eat a good meal and then, watch a I am second video or something like that and then talking about it. So it
Yep.
was just little things that added up to something really, really big.
So kind of keeping that in mind, like you mentioned that I mean, obviously I know you and I know your dad. And how do you, as a competitor, how do you balance the intense desire to win with the mindset of living the life that God has called you into?
It was just the process of purifying my mindset, giving myself the right motives to train, the right motives to want to win, the right motives to want to be better than somebody else. Because there's, obviously extremely unhealthy ways to want to win, to want to be better than someone else. But I had to just purify my mind and just ask God to guide me in terms of my motives for wanting to get up and train every day because I don't have to, but there's always like I go through a day and if there's just something I don't have complete. It's like it feels like there's something missing. I don't think that's an accident. I think God's given me a really like unique discipline, unique mindset to, especially just within sports, because that's just what I've done my whole life. So I think to, win and strive for excellence is being able to honor God with the platform He's giving me, and I want to win and strive for excellence because I think I have just the unique platform of soccer, and as I play it, it's a form of worship to my Lord.
Mm.
So I think that helps me, every day wake up and train, even when my body hurts or when I don't feel like it. But I know that in my training, in my pursuing of this game, it's worshiping God. The fact that I'm just pursuing it to its best ability and giving my all.
How long did that take for that to really begin to kind of sink into your mindset from looking at it as I got to just be the best ever versus this is a way I can choose to worship?
It
Was
was
that a quick process or was it something that
uh,
took some time?
probably not until like my latter stages of my junior year of high school. To be honest, I think I found myself just extremely unsatisfied and extremely unhappy with, just sports in general. I think in my junior year, not just with high school, but with club, like I just felt empty. And then I just really had to take a step back and realize I was pursuing it at such a high degree. I think for all the wrong reasons. I was so just focused on I am playing to play in college. I need to be great so I can get college coaches to notice me so I can play in college and so I can look good and all of that. And then I just had to really take a step back and then realize that it's just the completely wrong motive. And then I just had a prayer one night and I just surrendered it all to Jesus. I just asked him to just take my career and do whatever you want with it and just help me to
Mm.
follow you. And in doing that, I've just felt an unreal peace about everything. Since then, I've just been extremely content with everything. Heading into my senior year, obviously, it was like the last ride for my high school team with my dad. And like the previous 4 years, I never really felt like unsatisfied, but every year it was like, man, I got to win a section title, got to win a league title, got to win this, got to win that. And then my senior year, like my mindset heading into preseason was just like, with whatever happens, I'm going to be content with the career I had. And nothing changed in terms of my work rate, my work ethic, how much time I put into the game, how passionate I am. If anything, all that increased, and just my mindset, by purifying my mindset in Christ, just completely shift, and that changed everything from a sports perspective, from a life perspective. I was just much happier, and in my senior year, like we had one of our most successful years in the boys program history. So it was all happy days.
Absolutely. So you mentioned it a few times and maybe you've explained it, but just in case I missed it, which I could have, you talk about purifying your mind in Christ. Like what does that look like specifically? Maybe even for you.
Like, how do I balance wanting to living for God?
How would you explain
Was that your
purifying?
question?
How would you explain purifying your mind in Christ?
I would say like surrender. I think that was surrendering that specific thing to Jesus so that I know I'm truly having the right motives to pursue whatever I want to pursue, and making sure that
Yeah.
in everything or in that specific thing I'm doing, I'm not aiming to glorify myself. I'm aiming to glorify Jesus through. And if I find myself through surrendering it that, like, wow, like I was really trying to just glorify myself and raise me up and not glorify Jesus and raise him up, then that just isn't for me and I had to change.
Yeah. I love that. No, that's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. So it's the idea of surrender, letting go of what you want versus what, your motivating factor is to bring glory and honor to God.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I got one last question for you and then we'll get you out of here. But knowing you, like I mentioned earlier, you were the section two, you're one of the top scorers in New York State history. Um, how are you handling the fact that you had all the success in high school Now you're in college, and it's kind of almost in a way like you're the rookie, you're the newbie, you're the freshman again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really look at it as if I'm a rookie. I look at it as just a massive step forward in my progression as an athlete. Like I didn't come into college and be like, wow, I'm a freshman, I got to restart it all over. I just came in, and it was like just another big step into into my career. And obviously, there's a lot of challenges. Like it's new environment, new level, new team, new everything. But I never looked at it as starting over. I looked at it as just progression and keep going.
So that's a perspective change as well then. So that's an intentional choice to not look at it as a step back, but just to look at the whole and say, listen, this is just the
I
next
had
step.
to I had to look at it as a step of progression and not starting over just to benefit myself because I knew there's gonna be a lot of challenges that awaited me. So I had to really have a perspective shift for sure.
Do you think that's something most people as a freshman have, or is that something that you've really had to pray and ask God to help you with?
I think it's both. It was a lot of prayer because I knew, I mean, to go from, I mean, high school and club, I'm playing all the time. I'm the guy. Like at high school, it was, I was going into every game and I was scoring goals and I was the guy that they would look to. And now I'm in college and I am a guy that is just fighting for everything he's worth. So it's just a complete shift in everything, shift in perspective, shift in play, with everything. So it was just it's humbling because you realize just how big everything is.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, just
So I guess I lied. This is the last question. So if you could tell your high school freshman version of you one thing that would get him through the next 4 years of his life to where you are now, what would be that one thing freshman in high school Austin would have wanted to hear from you right now?
that is a great question. Hmm.
And it can be from a sports perspective, it could be from a faith-based perspective, it could be anything. But
Trying to think.
I know that was not. So those of you listening, I gave him kind of like a paragraph of different kinds of potential questions, and this was not one of them. It just hit me as we were talking. So, but he's the man, so I know he's going to have a great answer.
I will have a great answer. I just need to let my brain marinate for a little bit.
It's okay.
What would eighth grade Austin tell himself?
What would you right now? Yeah, what would eighth grade Austin want to hear from future Austin? So you right now.
I think my senior self. I think what my eighth grade self would want to hear my now college self tell him would be you just have to learn to be okay with the change of plans because
Mm,
my eighth grade year, I mean, obviously, I was just super excited because it was the beginning of my college journey. And I was obviously, after I made the team as an eighth grader, I was like, wow, I got 5 years of this. And each year I had a vision of how it was going to go. And each year my vision was not that.
mm,
So sometimes it was really hard for me to take. And obviously, I experienced a lot from, hard defeats, highs and lows, and COVID, and then everything kind of we discussed in the meeting. But I think I would just it would have been nice to have somebody say to learn to be okay when your plans change because they're going to change a lot.
mm. It's a great answer.
And
Being okay with the change of plans.
yes, because I mean, I think for everybody that's hard when you have a vision and it's such a good vision and it's going well, but then something happens and you have to learn to be okay with it. And I think that was the biggest thing in my junior year was just I had to learn to be okay with the constantly changing of with college on the horizon. So it was like I had my vision of how I was going to go. I was going to go through high school. I was going to go through club. I was playing at this high level club. I was producing week in, week out for club for high school. And I was, going to get all these amazing offers for college. And I was going to go play at this massive school and I was going to be the guy. And that just wasn't going to happen. And when I finally realized that my junior year, I was like, okay, I have to be okay with the change of plans. And
Mm,
I'm extremely happy where I'm at. And I am playing college soccer, so I'm living out my childhood dream, so I couldn't ask for anything more.
I love that. That actually, listening to you say that, it made me think of a verse. Proverbs 16:9 says, "We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps." So ultimately, it's the Lord's will anyway. It's just sometimes we can make our plans and have these ideas, and God will
And
end up still
when
getting
it
us there.
comes to surrendering, like
Mhm.
surrendering everything, letting him take control and you take a back seat.
Yeah, and that's hard to do,
They're hard to do.
but it's exciting to watch you continue in your journey, and as amazing as an athlete as you are an incredible human being and someone who truly does love the Lord. So I thank you so much for taking this time to chat
Yeah.
with me and to our listeners and just give them some practical ways and how they can share some of the same stuff you've gone through.
Yes, sir.
So any last thoughts, any plugs, anything you want to give a shout out to or plug before we go?
Uh, I don't. I've said more words in that meeting than I have in the last couple months, so that's a lot for me. Of
Okay. Um, that sounds like a plan then. Just wasn't sure. So thank you again so much, Austin. It's just
course,
so cool to see where you're at and see how God's using you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.